Welcome to the Two Step Podcast. I'm Meg,
And I'm Bag.
and this is an episode on difficult indie games. So, would you like to say something, Bag?
Yeah, so this is a topic that we thought about a little bit because it's like when you really think back on indie games over the last couple of years, I don't know about you, but the titles that really
Hang on.
come to my mind. Go ahead.
Is that a joke? This is a topic we really thought about.
No, we thought about it a little bit. Okay, so let's see here.
Did our homework.
So one of the main things that I think about is going to be, I guess it's considered an indie game. It got very popular, and it was very recent. It was Cuphead. That one got insanely popular. There's also what I think is probably the most unforgiving indie game, which is Darkest Dungeon. And then there's other ones like Binding of Isaac and things like that. But I think where we're gonna start out is gonna be just this seeming like trend of indie games to go either roguelike or like just this unforgivingly super high difficulty. Like they don't want you to be able to finish their game fast, so they make it insanely difficult. It's like when you go into one of these games, a lot of the time there isn't exactly a ton of, I don't want to say content because there is a decent amount of content, but a lot of times what it will seem like is that you go into a game like let's take a Binding of Isaac for example. One of the biggest things about Binding of Isaac is that it has a lot of replayability. There is a lot of, because it's the same exact levels basically, just slightly changed. You play through it, same level, same level, same level. You get completely randomized items, completely randomized enemies, completely randomized pretty much everything except the bosses and the levels, right? And even sometimes the bosses are random.
It is amongst the genre of games known as a roguelike. Because it's similar to the game made, I don't even know when it was made, I can't remember because I wasn't born around then, but it's similar to the game called Rogue, which was a dungeon crawling game that had basically randomized everything, and the goal was to get to the end of the dungeon and get a reward with a sprawling amount of upgrades, items, and enemies to help you, they were the obstacles, the enemies, and the upgrades and stuff were the items you got to help you on your way. And that was essentially the first style of role-playing games for a PC or whatever. The fundamental difference was that if you died, that was it. You would have to go back to the start. And this is true of Binding of Isaac.
Yeah, and when they say rogue-like games, because in Rogue, when you died, you were done. That was it. You lose absolutely everything. In games like Binding of Isaac, when they say roguelike, that means that when you die, you do lose most things. In some games, you'll retain like small stat bonuses, or you'll unlock items. Like in Binding of Isaac, for example, if you unlock a certain item, it will stay as an option throughout the entire game. But you've got to either beat bosses or do this or do that to be able to unlock these items permanently.
There was a game called Rogue Legacy, which is known as more of a rogue-lite game. And that's because the idea is you have a castle and you need to explore the castle. And the castle has bosses, and if you die, you go back to the start of the castle, and entering the castle costs gold, right? Mm-hmm. But you also use this gold to upgrade yourself. So your skills, you can unlock different spells and stuff that you can use. And those retain no matter how many times you go and die. Those will always be there. Hence it's known as a roguelite, because you don't lose everything when you die, and it will technically get easier enough that you can just steamroll it. These are very grindy games. Extremely grindy games. Everspace is another game that I was telling you about. Everspace is a roguelite. It's a light game as well for the same reason. Okay. You are in a ship and you go around killing enemies, and there's a path you have to take, and there is a story, and you unlock weapons and items as you go along. But the main idea is to get money, because the more money you get, the more upgrades you can get whenever you die.
So I guess Darkest Dungeon would be a roguelite then, if you really think about it.
If you want to, specialize into that.
It is brutally difficult. Like I was saying previously. Yeah, Darkest Dungeon is probably the most punishing of all of the indie games that we're going to talk about tonight. The biggest thing with Darkest Dungeon is that in Darkest Dungeon, you can just lose a character out of nowhere, and you just lose everything, and you won't even be ready for it sometimes. Like, what will happen is that you'll be, doing your thing, going down into whatever dungeon that you're in, you'll be fine, and then all of a sudden something will go wrong. And you can just lose your entire party, you can lose one character, you can lose two characters, you can lose everything, and it takes like hours to build up these characters. So they can just disappear.
These are games that are they're like Dark Souls, but where they're unforgiving. They're unforgiving in the sense that because you don't know what's coming, you don't know what to expect. So you get killed by just random things that there's a pattern. They're always there. Every time you play the game, they might come there and you know they're there, but you have to die before you know it's there. The difference is, imagine if it was Dark Souls, if when you died, you had to start all over again from the start with nothing.
Which would be absolutely insanely brutal, and thankfully it's not like that.
Yeah, and these are games that are clearly very heavily inspired by Contra and arcade games, which were like that. They were like that. You died, you went back. You might have a set amount of lives. Some even gave you health points. But the general rule of thumb was that if you died, you had to restart. And this was a trial and error. Of course they were like that because the more times you die, the more money you feed into the fucking arcade machine. So, makes sense.
That was capitalism making its mark back in the day.
And unfortunately, those sort of principles, those sort of game design principles have stuck because people like them, I guess. It's very, I know we have kind of mentioned this a little bit on our first episode, the difficulty of games, but it's a very Schadenfreude type thing.
Yeah, it is very strange. With the thing where like people enjoy just brutally difficult games for some reason.
And the thing too is that these aren't challenging. All right, I don't actually think these are legit challenging. These are beyond challenging. To me, a challenge is something that you could reliably beat with your wits and about you. But these games aren't designed to be beaten on the first pass. They're designed in such a way that you will die, right? And it's from that death that you learn, right? Nothing will really prepare you for that unless you go, of course, and experience it from somebody else's perspective. Like if you watched a stream of Darkest Dungeon, you could possibly get an understanding of when you'll get fucked. But since it's random, there's some random elements to it, you're still going to get fucked anyway.
Yeah, like in Darkest Dungeon, for example, if any of you guys have played it, what can happen, you build your team of 4 players, there's a bunch of different classes, and you have different abilities, you have armor, and you have a weapon. Those are the only real things that you can influence, right? You have trinkets too, I guess. You go down into this dungeon, there's like a light system where if it's really bright, you have a higher chance to surprise enemies, and if it's really dark, you have a higher chance to crit, but you also get hit much more often. And what can happen is the enemies will just crit you sometimes, and you can just be killed out of nowhere. You can be at full health, perfectly fine, the strongest character you've ever had, and an enemy can just be like, you know what, I don't think you're going to live today. He'll hit you once, do your entire health bar, and then you'll just be dead.
That reminds me of all of the deaths that players experience in the hardcore Path of Exile. It's not these shitty little trash mooks. I mean, it is, but it's because they get that, I've got a 1% crit chance. And you know what? Fuck you. It's your time to die, motherfucker. So you're dead. You can have the best defenses in the game, but it doesn't matter because they've decided to crit you for everything.
Yeah, and that's like the whole idea behind Path of Exile hardcore difficulty is that you design your characters to survive those weird occurrences. You don't make it to survive just day to day and be like a good overall character. That's how you make a standard character. In hardcore, you have to be ready for when literally every single thing that could go wrong goes wrong at the same time.
Now imagine that, but you can't prepare yourself for that. Congratulations, you're playing Darkest fucking Dungeon. Good
Exactly.
job. It's fine. And I'm not a fan of those games. I mean, I like the gameplay, but I'm not a fan of them because especially roguelites, because they're designed, I just find it cheap myself. I find it cheap to die like that with the expectation that you just have to grind and grind and grind until you basically one-shot the enemies and go past them. Because that's not a challenge to me. That's just you. It's tedious. You're spending the same amount of time over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until you can pass this wall, which is just a wall of numbers.
And it's just a wall of getcha mechanics. It's just like, hi, I got you, and there's nothing you could have done about it as they wag their finger at you.
Yeah, it's completely contrary to games like, in my opinion, Super Meat Boy, Cuphead, or the letter V 6 times, or Shovel Knight.
Yeah.
Because all of those games are brutal, right? They get brutally hard at points, right? But they don't change. They are predictable. Those games are far more like the original Contra series than games like Darkest Dungeon. Because Contra was predictable. The enemies were always in the same place every time. So as long as you knew the pattern, you could reliably beat it. It might take you a few tries to learn the pattern, but there was a pattern. And that is essentially the same in, Cuphead and Shovel Knight. There's a pattern.
There was
and so they're more...
Go ahead.
They're inherently more fear. They're unforgiving, like fucking balls, but they're more fear because there's a pattern there. There's no randomness fucking you like in Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, it's that like Nintendo difficult is what they used to call it back in the day. It was just, this game is completely unforgiving, but it is a pattern of unforgiving. You know what's coming. And like, I played through Cuphead. I beat Cuphead on the normal setting and I beat it on the hard setting, right? I played through the whole thing, and it took me a long time because I wasn't adapting to the game right. I was just kind of playing it casually or whatever, because most indie games, I don't really want to try hard. I just want to open them up and just mess around for a couple hours and be done. But with games like Cuphead, games like Darkest Dungeon, games like that, you can't just really play them casually. You actually have to try.
That's because, and that's actually a really common misconception. There's a misconception that indie games are casual games, which is further from the truth, because a lot of popular games are indie games. Right, I'll tell you the most popular indie game, all right? The Witcher.
True.
Technically, right? Because they publish it themselves, right? CD Projekt is a publisher, and CD Projekt Red is the developer of that, it's a subsidiary developer of the publisher. I mean,
it's still funny to think of The Witcher as an indie game, but you're correct. You're very correct.
Right. Technically, this could be the same for, that this could be true for Skyrim, right? If we want to get really fucking technical. Because, and hear me out, right? Before everyone fucking tunes out, go, what the fuck? You fucking crazy. Hear this. Bethesda Softworks are the developer that made Skyrim and Fallout and whatever. They are owned by the Bethesda studio. They are the publisher for the game, who are then owned by ZeniMax, right? But ZeniMax don't really publish. They're not really the publishers of the Bethesda games, because the Bethesda studio does it themselves. You just see the ZeniMax logo. They're the parent company, but they're technically their own company, right? The three companies are owned by the same company. This isn't like this is the same with World of Warcraft, which is why you get the joke, small indie company, because Blizzard is a indie company. It's not like, I don't know, Massive, who made The Division. They get their games published by Ubisoft.
Yeah, so I guess we can kind of rephrase our definition a little bit.
Yes.
Would be games made by a small company.
A small company, usually of less than a dozen people. That don't work in conjunction with anybody else, right? They don't have ties to bigger companies. But it is still a misconception that these small indie companies can't make great games, because Divinity Original Sin is
great game.
Indie game.
Absolutely great game. And it is an indie company. I don't agree with a lot of the things that they've done, but that game is very good.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. I mean, not all games are perfect. It's still a great game. I mean, it's the same with games like Tyranny.
Never played it.
And Planescape, Tides of Numenera.
Yes, Planescape was a very good game. Yeah.
Tyranny is made by Obsidian Entertainment.
Okay,
and
I know them.
They also made Pillars of Eternity. Now, Obsidian work with publishers quite often, but those, I believe, Pillars of Eternity was published by themselves. I don't know. I can't I will confirm that now, but I can't actually.
Yeah, I played Pillars of Eternity a decent amount, but
No, it was published by Paradox,
okay.
so never mind. Yeah,
Paradox
the
Interactive,
Paradox
right?
are pretty. Yes, but Paradox are pretty. They make a lot of good games. They publish a lot of good games, but that's beside the point. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to our topic after we tangented a little bit there. So when we're talking about like indie games, I go into them thinking, when I play a game, when I play a non-competitive game, so I'll rephrase that to non-competitive because I do play a few competitive games, and when I play a non-competitive game, a lot of the time I don't go in there with this mindset of, oh, I need to just beat my head against this wall and figure it out and, actually, really use my brain muscle, So I go into Cuphead and I'm playing it a little bit, and it took me a while to be able to get to the point where I'm like, okay, I actually have to look at this like the game is fighting me and I need to beat it into submission, And eventually, once that clicked, I got it.
But you did beat the tutorial, right?
Yes, I am one step above a journalist, so if you guys were ever worried that the Two Step Podcast were just low tier shitty gaming journalists, we're a little bit above that.
Are you sure? I need video evidence of you beating the tutorial.
Video evidence? I don't know that I have that, my friend. I'm sorry.
I'd ask you for video evidence. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard. But yeah, it's funny because I'm not a huge fan of. I love the gameplay of Contra and Cuphead and stuff like that, but I'm not a huge fan of what I would call artificial difficulty. And I know that is a contentious statement to make.
Mm-hmm.
It's very debatable what constitutes as artificial difficulty, but the reason I consider it artificial is because it is a byproduct of arcade games who made their games to be very difficult with easy deaths so that you would spend more quarters. This doesn't mean they're not fun, but it does mean that they're harder than they actually needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I would say they're not a reasonable difficulty. What made games like Contra better by comparison is that you didn't have to plug in a quarter every 5 seconds, but it was still being marred by this artificial difficulty. And I think it covers bad design. I actually think this is really true of a lot of Nintendo games. In the Nintendo era of games, there were a lot of very short games, as in games with 5 to 10 levels, right? But they were a lot longer. They were made a lot longer because difficult. They were really fucking hard.
Battletoads.
Fucking Battletoads. I mean, even the original Super Mario Brothers could get very difficult very quickly. And it's not a long game. There's only 8 waves, and you can skip most of them. It's a long game if you want to do every fucking level, but that's not really the way you play. Then there's like DuckTales, and DuckTales, I had that as a kid, and I beat that as a kid. I actually found that a lot easier than Super Mario Bros. As a child, but really brutal, really, really hard game. And it can be beaten in about. A lot of those games can be.
Super Mario, I think, is at like 4 minutes and 53 seconds now, is the world record for it. And
so those games are hard, which makes them, it artificially lengthens the amount of time you play them for. And I feel that a lot of newer indie games, like, Darkest Dungeon, are kind of, they're teetering on that edge. Yeah, they're fun, but they would not be fun for nearly as long if they were any easier, I think.
Which is weird to think about, because it's like, so are they doing a good job by making their game insanely difficult because it requires less development? Is that a good thing? Is that something we like? I mean, or is it good for them and something we don't like?
Well, it's definitely good for them, I think, but it depends on it also depends on the price point. Right, I'm pretty sure Darkest Dungeon, what was it, $20?
I think so, 20 or less, and they're always on sale.
And I don't have an issue with that, right? Exactly. I don't have an issue with paying $20 for a game that I may not actually play that much, which is basically most of the games that I buy on the Steam sale, like everyone else.
Yeah, right? I was about to say, that's like everyone else. One game that I would say is a very good example of hitting a good balance between the two would be the letter V 6 times. Now, interesting story about that game is that when I was younger, used to browse the asshole of the internet, which is 4chan, and there was a flashboard on 4chan. And when the letter V6 Times was in development, the creator of that used to post the developmental builds to the flash board of that website. So
yeah, because
go ahead.
Because 4chan wasn't completely shit. It was just like the random board.
Yeah,
and all the porn
basically,
ones.
yeah, and that.
Yeah,
but that's what everybody knows it for. Unfortunately, there were very many legitimate boards on that website. As much as people will say, "Oh yeah, it's whatever," but there were a lot of legitimate boards, and he used to post the beta builds of that there. So I used to play like the little short beta builds until it finally came out as a full game. And that game, I loved that game. It was excellent.
Back when games did that. Back when games actually had full releases.
Mm-hmm.
Back
now
when
it's just like, well, I heard you like Human Revolution, and I heard you like those type of games, but
no, I was thinking, I heard you like early access.
Yeah,
7-year early access. Woo!
7-year early access. What's that one game? There's a game. What was the one that was basically like the starter of that? Was it? Is it
DayZ?
DayZ, yeah, it was DayZ. It was the one that started that, and then I think isn't Ark still in like early access or something like that?
No, but it might as well be. Here's the problem. Here's what I'm going to go on. Ark started a trend, a very fucking horrible trend. All right. Now I don't care about the fact that they released DLC during the development of early access, because I know why they did that. All right. And I find it understandable, but I'm not going to explain that. What I don't like is them not fixing any of the fucking bugs and slapping a version 1.0 release on it.
Of course.
Because what's the point? It's basically an early access because it still has massively bad performance and massively bad. It sucks because I love Ark, right? I've played a lot of Ark. I really love the concept, but the developers can suck a dick. All right? Yeah. I'm obviously burning that bridge before it's even built, but
it's like, all right, developers of Ark, you're gone. Sorry.
But fuck you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have other games that did this. Rust did this, and PUBG did this.
Yeah, PUBG is now getting acceptable as a game, but that was one of the worst optimized, and there were so many bugs, and it was sold for consoles. You could buy physical discs in a store.
No. You don't know shit. All right. Have you heard of 7 Days to Die?
I have seen you playing it a bunch, but I know nothing of it.
I love 7 Days to Die. It's a zombie survival game like DayZ, Rust, all that crap, right? It's basically Minecraft with fucking zombies, right? I like that game. But they released it on Xbox, and it's still technically in early access.
Yeah.
It's got a CD. I can go to the fucking local EB's Games, GameStop, whatever, and buy it on fucking disc for my PlayStation or Xbox. A game that has not got a full release and probably won't until 2040.
Yeah, that's kind of questionable that is something that's considered acceptable at this point, because businesses are carrying this physical game. But
the problem is that it's not so much that it was less acceptable beforehand. I think it was always acceptable. It's just that people have now got the audacity to try it, and it works. So why fucking not?
Yeah,
right?
Why not at this point? But once again, there were in V6 Times was a Flash game, and there have actually been a lot of Flash games that
it was a Flash game
that have turned into full games. Like the one that I always think about is gonna be, and if you haven't played this game, I'm sorry, but the game Sunny is actually a mobile game now. If you didn't know.
Wait, really? I could play that on my fucking phone.
It's okay. Before you get excited, so it is different.
How much different?
It has the same style, but I feel that it is inherently worse. It's good enough that I played through the entire thing, but it's very similar. But there's, of course, it's free to play, so there's ads everywhere. But
that is a really good game though. Sony 1, 2, and 3. Oh no, it wasn't Sony 3. It was it was a different game that he made way before Sony, and Sony was the base, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's fucking good. Sony is a classic Flash game, a role-playing game. It was one of the first ever detailed, in-depth, quite long RPG Flash games. Actually, I think that's the resounding thing you'll get away from it, is the fact that it has It's an RPG like any RPG. You have items that you equip. The battles are turn-based, like Final Fantasy. You have skills, like talent tree kind of skills that you can use, and you can change them whenever you want. And it's fucking long. It's really long. It has a save feature because of, I would say it's at least 10 hours.
Yeah,
a 10-hour game.
If you're playing through it for the first time, it definitely takes quite a while. But once you get the hang of it, it doesn't take as long.
It was a very impressive game for something that came out on sites like Armor Games and Miniclip for free. A very, very impressive game. It's funny because now those games you will see on the mobile store for free with microtransactions, like, Angry Birds.
And ads, and I mean, because, like, a lot of the time, I don't mind games that put, ads in their games, but it's
I know why they do it. It makes sense.
It does make sense, because that's the way that they make money now, They used to be able to make money elsewise before, but
they used to not be able to... Well, the thing, too, is that a lot of Flash developers didn't make money before anyways.
Yeah,
and
sure.
so they could... If you were a Flash developer, you weren't... And you were releasing your games on Armor Games, you know who was making money? Armor Games. At least you got a sponsorship by them and they gave you money to develop this game, whatever. You got nothing. You just got publicity. And so if you wanted to be a Flash developer for games or any of those kind of things, you got nothing. So mobile games is a really good way for people who want to get into that kind of casual game development market to make games. People who don't want to make a fucking AAA blockbuster game is what I'm getting at there, though.
And it's okay as long as you don't make it so that every single time I have to play a level, I have to watch an ad. As long as you don't do that, give me at least like 2 or 3 playthroughs, okay? If you make it like one playthrough and then I get some like 30-second ad that I can't skip, I'm deleting your game immediately. I don't care how good it is.
Yeah, and another thing too is that we're obviously not a fan of fucking pay-to-win bullshit microtransactions.
Yeah, that's very relevant in mobile games, but if it's gonna be a multiplayer game, it should not be pay-to-win. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, things like Angry Birds was based off a Flash game called Destroy the Castle, and then we have Flappy Bird,
God,
which is not only really topical because not only is that a game that it went to mobile and all that shit, but it's also what the fuck difficulty. Like that guy made that game, and you just think why? What the fuck compelled you to make it this fucking difficult, dude?
It was legitimately so difficult that he was getting death threats, and people were upset with it because it got so popular, let alone the whole issue with it just ripping, Mario graphics straight from Mario and using them. That's a whole nother, barrel.
Oof.
But
he made a lot of fucking money off that game,
but
did. It's a good thing he pulled it when he did, because if he had made... Nintendo do not like you stealing their shit.
And they will sue you into the ground. They are the Apple of video game companies.
And rightfully so, alright? I don't like... I've had people steal my shit. And fuck you for stealing my shit. I don't like you. You stole my shit.
But,
right?
But he made a lot of money off of that game.
He did. I mean, that's a really good example of somebody who posts the game, gets really successful, then pulls out right at the right moment.
Exactly.
Right?
And he did make more games, and to be honest, the games that he made after that, there was like a weird helicopter game that he made, was so much more difficult than Flappy Bird. Because
they're not bad as a novelty, by the way. They're actually pretty damn good. But I do think he got upset with the death threats, because
why wouldn't you get upset with having your life threatened? I think that's
because I'm different. I do think that's reasonable, but I'm also a fucking asshole and have been on the internet long enough to know that if somebody really wants to fly a goddamn ticket over to where I fucking live, bring it on.
Yeah, let's go, right?
Fuck you. Saying that, I'm not doxing myself just to prove a point.
Just to prove a point. Yeah, that wouldn't.
I'm not doing that.
But yeah,
I don't have SWAT here.
But Flappy Bird. So there is an ending to Flappy Bird, and I've seen videos of people. You have to get.
Have you?
You have to get to like 1,000.
I've never seen it.
So you have to get to 1,000 points. I've gotten to like 150, right? So I've made it to like 150, and that is more.
That's more than me.
That is more than the majority of people. I just kind of got into a rhythm one time. I've never been able to get to 150 again, but at the end of it, you actually fight Mario, and you have to like dodge fireballs. So I mean, legitimately, it's stolen graphics. Yeah, spoiler alert for like one of the hardest games from like 7 years ago.
Spoiler alert for that game. Nobody will ever beat.
Nobody will ever
Holy
beat. But
God.
yeah, so
Man, I gotta look that up.
it's an interesting dynamic when you think about like how difficult games are made, because that game literally has like that probably took him, if he's a semi decent coder, it probably took him a day to make that game.
That would have taken him no time, yeah.
And then you look at games where people take literally like their entire life and put it into it. And I mean, there are games that do well when people put like unimaginable amounts of work into it. Like,
are you talking about Dwarf Fortress?
Okay, there could be an entire episode on Dwarf Fortress. So let's just move that into the bin and we'll get to it later.
I mean, but it is though. Like he did spend his entire life. It is his magnum opus.
I know, but we can move Dwarf Fortress to its own episode. I want to more so talk about like Binding of Isaac and the sequel to Binding of Isaac, where you know,
don't talk shit about Toady 1.
Yeah, where he spent, and I also want to say that Binding of Isaac has some of my favorite music in an indie game ever. Like hands down, I think it has some of the best music. I love it.
It's got great music, but I really, really love the Letter V 6 Times music. I love that soundtrack.
Oh, I do love that soundtrack as well, but in my brain I consider it different because it's like, I don't want to say it's like less difficult to compose. I really like the Letter V 6 Times track, but it's all chiptune type, you know?
Oh yeah, of course, but I love chip. Okay. I want to, this is a sidetrack, but since we're on the topic of music now, I just want to say that I don't know why, but the people who develop the music for indie games are fucking good, alright? Because indie games have such fucking great music.
They do.
Right? Crypt of the Necrodancer obviously is a game about music since it's a rhythm game, but that has fantastic music.
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Cuphead, I'm not even gonna go on Cuphead because I could speak and I could praise the music of that game since that is some of my favorite genre of music, right? I could praise that for and a half an hour. Alright, then you've got things like Shovel Knight, the Letter V 6 Times, Binding of Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck, man? Oh, I'm a single developer who makes developed games and I'm not that great an artist, but hey, here's the best music you're gonna ever listen to for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I really don't understand that. That is another trend. I guess that's up there with this whole entire idea of this episode of difficulty in indie games. It's like, why is the music so good in indie games? Why is it so powerful?
I don't know. It's like I can kind of get why the difficulty is there, because it might be making up for flaws of the bad game, of certain bad game design. But I don't know why the music's good.
Like FTL has great music. Axiom Verge has great music. Enter the Gungeon, V6 Times, like, Shovel Knight. The list goes on.
Are these people? Are these all just like musicians that then went into gaming?
Yeah, is that like the progression of it? They're just like, how do I get my music out there? No one wants to listen to my music, so let me make an indie game and just make it this great, awesome game that's super difficult, but the music, you'll never forget the music.
Well, this is a tangent too, but that's what made music of, in my opinion, the 80s and 90s video games so much better, because they were limited.
Yeah.
And
they were creativity.
Yes, exactly. And we're not limited now, which is good, but it's also bad. And I think because the musicians of the games, the indie games, may not necessarily have the range or the studio equipment to be as comprehensive as, let's say, Cuphead. It's not like Cuphead. If you go look behind the scenes for that, they had an entire fucking orchestra to do that music, right?
Oh yeah, I've seen the behind the scenes stuff of like the 30 instrumentals.
Most indie devs don't have that, so I guess they'd use what they have.
A keyboard and a program.
Yeah, well, that's basically it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's fucking good. We are, however, running out on time. We have exceeded the 30-minute time limit that we normally give ourselves.
Mm-hmm, we have.
So, with that, I'm going to bid everyone adieu. So, again, oh yes, by the way, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and all that jazz. Post us on the Facebooks and the Twitters.
All of your favorite social medias. Make sure to tell your friends, your family.
Social medias. Tell your friends. Tell your family. I'm Mag.
And I'm Bag.
Bye.
We'll see you later.